Theo was just a boy, but there was a quiet wisdom in his eyes that disarmed anyone who paid close attention. At 12 years old, he knew more about constellations than most adults knew about their own backyards. He spent his nights on the porch of the small wooden house with a simple telescope and a notebook, scribbling stars as if trying to decipher a secret written in the sky. The cold country nights didn't deter him, they seemed to embrace him. To Theo, the sky wasn't just an infinite space. It was a refuge. Theo's illness struck like a sudden storm. At first, the symptoms were subtle: fatigue, loss of appetite. Then came the tests, the complicated words no child should hear, and finally, the diagnosis, a rare and aggressive condition. The doctors were blunt with Raul, the grandfather who had raised Theo since his parents died in an accident. They didn't sugarcoat it, but Raul could read between the lines. Time was short. Raul, 68, was a man who bore the weight of a lifetime on his shoulders, calloused hands, a hunched back from years of laboring in the fields, and a heart too heavy from watching the disease consume his grandson. But he never let Theo see that. Every night, he sat beside the boy with an old blanket, listening to stories about stars, nebulas, and black holes as if they were living legends. "Grandpa, did you know Betelgeuse could explode at any moment?" Theo asked, his excitement masking the weakness in his voice. "Betelgeuse? Is that like a fire signal in the sky?" Raul replied, scratching his head with a tired smile. "It's a red supergiant. When it explodes, it'll be so bright you might see it during the day." Theo gazed at the sky, as if expecting to witness the event right then and there. Despite everything, there was a light in Theo's eyes. He had a dream, something that gave his days purpose: to witness a rocket launch up close. He spoke about rockets the way other boys talked about superheroes. When he watched videos on the old TV in the living room, his face lit up with a mix of awe and longing. For Theo, watching a rocket break through the atmosphere wasn't just a scientific experience, it was almost spiritual, a testament to the possibility of escaping earthly limitations. Raul, however, knew this dream was nearly impossible. They lived far from any space center and struggled just to pay medical bills. Even so, he couldn't deny the spark in his grandson's eyes. One night, while Theo slept, Raul sat at the kitchen table, illuminated by a dim light bulb, and began to write. His trembling hands traced uneven lines on crumpled sheets of paper. He tried everything: letters to space agencies, emails to NGOs, messages to businesspeople he wasn't even sure would read them. Some replies came, but they were cold and formal: "We regret to inform you that we cannot accommodate your request." Others didn't reply at all. The clock on the wall struck 3 a.m. when Raul set his pen down. He looked out the window at the stars. He hadn't prayed in years, but at that moment, he murmured a plea to the void. Just one launch. Just one rocket. He deserves this. Theo, though unaware, could sense his grandfather's determination. There was a near-palpable connection between them, something that transcended words. And though the boy never directly asked, Raul knew this was his grandson's final wish. At that moment, the sky felt farther away than ever, but Raul wasn't ready to give up. Something inside him, an almost ancestral force, told him he'd find a way. So, he prepared for the hardest fight of his life, facing the indifference of the world. Raul, driven by a force he barely understood, devoted his mornings and nights to reaching anyone who could help them. His small address book soon became filled with scribbles of company names, foundations, and even influential people he'd seen on TV. He crafted messages that alternated between clumsy formality and raw emotion. Most of the replies were impersonal and to the point, a handful of cold words that cut Raul like a knife. "Unfortunately, we cannot fulfill this request. Our program does not include external visits. We wish you strength during this difficult time." Raul read each rejection silently, carefully folded the paper, and placed it in a box. He didn't want Theo to sense his frustration. For him, the boy still needed to believe something was possible. One night, Raul came across a small company called Vortex Dynamics, a startup that didn't have the grandeur of the space giants, but something on its website caught his attention. In the main photo, a young engineer smiled beside a model rocket. Her expression had a determination that reminded him of Theo. With trembling fingers, Raul wrote a message that was simple but honest. "My grandson Theo is 12 years old. He's sick and loves space. His dream is to see a rocket launch. I know you're busy, but any help, any gesture, would be a miracle for him." He sent the email with the faintest hope of a response. And then he waited. 2 days later, Raul received a phone call. The voice on the other end was lively and welcoming. "Mr. Raul? My name is Clara, and I'm an engineer at Vortex Dynamics. I read your email and, well, I'd like to know more about Theo." Raul almost dropped the phone. After a moment of silence, he replied sincerely. "He's an incredible boy, and he's running out of time." Clara listened intently as Raul described Theo, his passion for stars and rockets, and how much it all meant to him. She didn't make any promises then, but her voice had something different. It was warm, as if she truly cared. In the days that followed, Clara began exchanging frequent messages with Raul, gathering details about Theo's health and preferences. She knew she didn't have the financial power of the big companies, but there was something Vortex Dynamics could offer, a small spot at their next launch. When Clara finally called to confirm the invitation, Raul remained silent for a few seconds, tears streaming down his face without him realizing it. He looked at the sky through the window, as if silently giving thanks. Raul decided to keep the news a secret until everything was finalized. He began planning the trip without Theo suspecting a thing, a huge challenge since the boy was observant and curious. For the first time in months, Raul felt the weight of his struggle lighten, replaced by something rare, hope. The connection had been made, but many obstacles lay ahead. Theo's dream was still as fragile as a distant star, but for the first time, it seemed within reach. Raul clung to that hope as if his life depended on it, because, for him, it did. Raul knew that telling Theo right away could create dangerous expectations. He needed to be certain the promise would be kept before seeing that brilliant smile light up his grandson's face. Carefully, he began planning the trip to the launch site. For that, he needed money he didn't have. He sold what he could, old tools, unused furniture, even a watch he'd kept since his wedding to his late wife. When a neighbor asked why he was parting with so much, Raul simply smiled and said, "It's for something very important." Meanwhile, Theo continued his nightly stargazing, unaware of what Raul was planning. One evening, Theo looked at his grandfather and asked, "Do you think we can see the stars from somewhere else? Not just here, from the world?" Raul swallowed hard, feeling a lump in his throat. He wasn't good with words, but he answered the only way he knew how. "I think sometimes, if you believe enough, the universe gives you a chance." While Raul did his part, Clara was mobilizing her team. Although Vortex Dynamics was just a startup, its team was passionate. When Clara shared Theo's story, the other engineers were deeply moved. They decided it wouldn't just be an invitation to watch the launch, they wanted to give Theo an unforgettable experience. They arranged a special behind-the-scenes tour, something they had never done before. Clara personally began planning how to explain each technical detail to Theo in a simple but fascinating way. It wasn't easy. Theo required constant medical care, and the long trip to the launch site demanded careful planning. Clara helped Raul coordinate everything. An ambulance would be on standby, along with a volunteer medical team to accompany Theo. Raul was overwhelmed by the efforts of strangers to help his grandson. It was as if, suddenly, the world had heard his plea. Finally, the moment came to tell Theo. Raul walked into the small room where the boy was resting and sat beside him. Theo was sketching a rocket in his notebook, as he did almost every day. "Theo," Raul began hesitantly. "There's something I want to tell you." The boy stopped drawing and looked at him, curious. Raul took a deep breath, trying to hold back tears. "You're going to see a real launch." For a moment, Theo said nothing. His eyes widened, and the pen fell from his hand. Then, with a smile that seemed to light up the entire room, he threw himself into his grandfather's arms. "Really, Grandpa? Am I really going?" His voice was filled with joy, something Raul hadn't heard in a long time. "Really, my boy?" The sparkle in Theo's eyes at that moment was enough for Raul to know that all the effort would be worth it. With their hearts full of hope, the two began preparing for the trip that would change their lives. The day of departure arrived with a mix of excitement and anxiety. Theo was radiant, asking questions non-stop while Raul checked the last preparations. The bags were ready, the medications carefully organized. But when they went to catch the bus to the airport, an unexpected setback shook their plans. The driver informed them that the vehicle had engine trouble. Raul felt the weight of the situation but didn't show despair. Theo, curious, looked at his grandfather, waiting for a solution. With a tense smile, Raul said, "Kid, if we want to reach the sky, a little bus engine isn't going to stop us." Soon after, with the help of a kind neighbor who offered to drive them in his old car to the nearest bus station, they continued their journey. Raul thanked him repeatedly, while Theo sat in the back seat, gazing out the window as if the world were a stage of discovery. The airport was a whole new universe for Theo, who had never left the small town where he lived. His eyes sparkled as he watched planes take off and land. "Grandpa, do you think rockets make more noise than these planes?" Raul smiled, enchanted by his grandson's curiosity. "More, Theo. Much more. You'll feel the ground shake." Behind his smile, Raul tried to hide his worry about the logistics. He had to negotiate with a staff member to ensure Theo received priority boarding, quickly explaining the situation. The man, moved, expedited the process, helping them reach the boarding gate without delays. Theo, oblivious to the tension, seemed ecstatic about the idea of flying. The moment the plane took off was unforgettable for Theo. He gripped Raul's hand tightly, his face a mix of fear and wonder. When the plane stabilized, Theo looked out the window, seeing the clouds from above for the first time. "Grandpa, look! Are we close to the stars?" Raul swallowed hard, moved by the boy's joy. "Not yet, kiddo. But we're on the way." During the flight, Theo couldn't stop talking about how amazing it must be to be in a rocket. Raul listened patiently, hiding the exhaustion of weeks of effort. The sparkle in Theo's eyes made every sacrifice worthwhile. When they arrived at their destination, Clara was already waiting with a warm smile and a Vortex Dynamics cap, which she promptly placed on Theo's head. "Welcome, astronaut. Ready to explore the future?" Theo looked at Clara with admiration, holding the cap as if it were a trophy. During the drive to the Space Center, Clara enthusiastically explained what they would see. Theo asked countless questions, each answer sparking even more fascination. When the Space Center finally appeared on the horizon, Theo fell silent. Raul noticed his grandson's expression of awe as he saw the towering launch structures bathed in sunlight. Each structure looked like something straight out of Theo's notebook sketches. "It's even better than in my dreams," he murmured, gripping Raul's hand. Clara led Theo and Raul on an initial tour, introducing them to a life-size replica of the rocket that would soon be launched. Theo touched the metallic structure cautiously, as if afraid to damage it. He looked at Clara and Raul with eyes full of wonder. "So this is what touches the stars?" Clara crouched to Theo's level. "That's right. And in just a few days, you'll see this rocket really soar up there." Raul watched his grandson, Clara's voice fading into the background amidst the overwhelming emotions he felt. Theo was standing before something far greater than he had ever dreamed, and Raul knew he had managed to bring his grandson closer to infinity than he ever thought possible. The next morning, Theo was taken to a restricted area of the Space Center, a rare privilege that Clara had worked hard to arrange. He wore his Vortex Dynamics cap proudly, his eyes wide as he tried to take in every detail. The engineers enthusiastically explained how each part of the rocket worked. Clara made sure to simplify the terms so Theo could understand. "This here is the fuel tank. It stores what we call propellant, which pushes the rocket upward, overcoming gravity." "So it's like the rocket's heart?" Theo asked, genuinely curious. Clara laughed, delighted by his insight. "That's right, Theo. Without it, none of this works." The Vortex team quickly grew fond of Theo. They were impressed by his intelligent questions and enthusiasm. Even the more jaded employees, used to the relentless pace of their work, found themselves charmed by the boy. "Hey, Theo, have you ever thought about becoming an engineer?" one technician joked. "No, but I think it'd be cool to drive the rocket." He laughed, his eyes sparkling with an unspoken dream. Later, Clara took Theo to an outdoor area overlooking the actual rocket, already positioned on the launch pad. The wind blew strong as Theo stood silently, absorbing the sight. Raul, sitting on a nearby bench, watched from a distance, letting Clara and Theo talk. "Why do you do this?" Theo suddenly asked, still looking at the rocket. "Do what?" Clara asked, intrigued. "Build rockets. Why is it so important to you?" Clara thought for a moment before answering. "Because I always thought the sky was too big for us to just look at. I wanted to reach it. And, if I can, I want to help other people feel that too." Theo smiled, as if he understood perfectly. "That's how I feel when I look at the stars." As Theo explored the Space Center, Raul had a private moment with Clara. She was cheerful but noticed the serious expression on his face. "He's loving all of this," Clara said, trying to ease the tension. Raul nodded, but his voice was heavy with emotion. "I know he doesn't have much time. The doctor said that his heart might not last more than a few weeks." Clara didn't know what to say. It was as if the weight of Theo's dream had become even more urgent. She took a deep breath and placed a hand on Raul's shoulder. "We'll make this worth it." At the end of the day, Clara took Theo and Raul to a hangar where a space capsule from a previous mission was stored. To Theo's surprise, she let him go inside. "You can sit in the pilot's seat, Theo." He hesitated for a moment but then settled into the seat, carefully touching the controls. His eyes sparkled in a way Raul had never seen before. "This is where the stars begin, isn't it?" Theo whispered, looking at Clara and Raul. For Clara, it felt like that moment justified all her work. For Raul, it was as if he were holding time still, stopping it from moving forward. The day ended with Theo exhausted but happy, daydreaming about rockets, stars, and possibilities. For Clara and Raul, Theo's joy was a reminder that sometimes the smallest moments could be as grand as the cosmos itself. The big day was approaching, and Theo woke up with more energy than usual. Raul, visibly tired from worry and preparations, did everything he could to keep up with his grandson's excitement. The Vortex Dynamics team was also in high gear, finalizing the last details for the launch. The next morning, Clara stopped by to give Theo a small personalized badge with his name on it. "You're officially part of the mission now, Theo," she said with a smile. Theo couldn't contain his joy. He walked through the halls wearing the badge around his neck, feeling like a real astronaut. Before the launch, Clara arranged a special session with Theo to explain what he would see. Sitting in front of a large rocket model, Clara pointed to different parts as she spoke. "Here, at the base, are the engines. When they ignite, the rocket will create a massive thrust to break free of gravity." "And what happens to these parts?" Theo asked, pointing to the side tanks. "They detach when the fuel runs out. It's like the rocket leaves parts of itself behind as it climbs higher." Theo thought for a moment before saying, "So it's like life, right? Sometimes you have to leave things behind to get where you want to go." Clara and Raul exchanged an emotional glance. It was impossible not to feel the depth of Theo's words, despite his young age. The night before the big day, Raul and Theo sat together on a small bench, looking at the sky. The rocket was already visible on the launch pad, illuminated by spotlights that highlighted its majesty against the darkness. "Grandpa, do you think I'll feel the ground shake tomorrow?" Theo asked, his voice filled with anticipation. "It'll shake so much you'll think you're flying with it," Raul replied, trying to hold back tears. Theo smiled and rested his head on his grandfather's shoulder. "I wish you could see the stars with me someday, up there." Raul pulled him into a tight hug, unable to respond. Finally, the moment arrived. The weather was perfect, clear skies, no clouds. The area around the launch pad was packed with spectators and professionals, but Theo and Raul had a special spot reserved right at the front, where they could feel the full force of the launch. Theo wore a Vortex Dynamics jacket and held his badge tightly. He looked at the rocket as if seeing an extension of his own dreams. Raul, beside him, was visibly emotional but tried to focus on his grandson's excitement. A voice over the loudspeaker announced the start of the countdown. 10, 9, 8, Theo began counting along, his voice brimming with excitement. When the rocket finally launched, the sound was deafening. The ground truly shook, just as Raul had promised. Theo grabbed his grandfather's hand, his eyes fixed on the rocket as it ascended, leaving a trail of smoke and fire against the blue sky. "It's going!" Theo shouted, his voice filled with emotion. "It's going to the stars, Grandpa." Raul couldn't hold back his tears. Theo's smile was so pure, so full of life, that for a moment, everything felt right. The launch was a success, and the rocket disappeared into the clouds, leaving a mark in the sky, and in the hearts of everyone there. For Theo, it was the pinnacle of everything he had dreamed of. For Raul, it was a triumph over time, a memory he would treasure forever. As soon as the rocket disappeared into the sky, Theo kept his eyes fixed upward, as if he could pierce through the clouds and follow its journey. He was speechless, but the smile on his face said it all. Raul watched him, his heart torn between joy and melancholy. "That was incredible, Grandpa. I felt it, I really felt it," Theo said, his voice choked with emotion. Raul simply nodded, gripping his grandson's hand tightly. He didn't trust his voice to respond. After the launch, Clara and other members of the Vortex Dynamics team approached to congratulate Theo. They treated him like an integral part of the mission, showing him graphs and initial launch data. Theo, you saw it happen live, but now you're seeing the numbers. This is what turns a dream into science, Clara explained, pointing to a screen displaying altitude and speed data. Theo was fascinated, his eyes lighting up as he pointed at the graphs. One day, this will be about a ship with people inside, right? He asked. It will be. And who knows? Maybe it'll be you up there, Clara replied with a smile. Before saying goodbye, Clara handed Theo a small piece of metal. This is a fragment of a rocket that has been to space. Think of it as a piece of the universe that's now yours. Theo held the fragment reverently, as if it were the most valuable object in the world. He looked at Clara, tears welling in his eyes. Thank you, for giving me the stars. While Theo was busy talking with other engineers, Clara pulled Raul aside. He's amazing, Mr. Raul. That boy, he's something special. Raul smiled, though sadness lingered in his eyes. He's all I have left. I just want him to know the world is bigger than the pain he feels. Clara placed a hand on Raul's shoulder. I think he already knows. And he'll carry that with him, always. Later, back at the hotel, Theo was exhausted but happy. He clutched the rocket fragment tightly, as if afraid to lose it. Raul helped him lie down, tucking him in carefully. Grandpa, today was the best day of my life, Theo said, his voice weakened by fatigue but filled with sincerity. Raul sat beside him, gently stroking his hair. It was the best day of my life too, kiddo. Theo closed his eyes with a smile, and Raul stayed by his side, feeling the weight of the silence. As the night stretched on, Raul gazed out the window at the starry sky. He knew that somehow, this moment would last forever. Whatever came next didn't matter. What mattered was that, on this day, Theo had touched the infinite. The day after the launch, Theo was still caught up in the experience. He kept recounting every detail, the rocket, the vibrations, the sheer power of the moment, as if afraid the memory might fade. Grandpa, do you think I could work with rockets one day? He asked while playing with the fragment Clara had given him. Raul, smiling with emotion, replied. I think you're already closer to the stars than anyone I know. Before they left the Space Center, Clara arranged a small farewell meeting with the Vortex Dynamics team. They said goodbye to Theo with hugs, promises to stay in touch, and a symbolic mission participation certificate. Theo held the certificate like it was a prize, loudly promising to show it to everyone back in his town. As she said her goodbyes to Raul, Clara let out a heavy sigh. No matter what happens, Mr. Raul, what you two have is special. Thank you for reminding us why we do what we do. The trip back was quieter but no less meaningful. Theo slept for much of the journey, his head resting on Raul's shoulder. Raul stared out the bus window, his thoughts drifting between the relief of fulfilling his grandson's dream and the lingering pain of knowing what lay ahead. When they returned home, their small house felt even smaller, almost out of place after experiencing something so monumental. But Theo didn't seem to mind. He ran to his telescope, adjusting it as he always did, now with a new story to share with the stars. The days that followed were filled with moments of joy interspersed with the relentless progression of the illness. Theo grew weaker, but his spirit remained unbroken. He spent hours gazing at the sky, explaining constellations to Raul. There, Grandpa, that's Orion. You know what's funny? When Betelgeuse explodes, someone might be watching it from a rocket. Raul simply nodded, holding Theo's hand tightly. One afternoon, as Theo rested in bed, he looked at Raul with a serious expression. Grandpa, do you think I'll get to see the stars for real when I'm not here anymore? Raul swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the question. He didn't want to lie, but he also couldn't destroy that last thread of hope. I think, when you look up, it'll be like being in the fastest rocket ever. And I'll look at you every night, whenever I see the stars." Theo smiled, satisfied with the answer. "Then it's a deal." That day marked a shift between them. It was no longer just about the launch, it was about something that transcended time and space. Raul felt that even in the face of loss, something eternal was being built between them. Days after returning home, Theo received an unexpected package from Vortex Dynamics. Inside was a detailed model of the rocket he had seen launch, accompanied by a note from Clara. "Theo, this rocket is now yours. Whenever you look at it, remember that the sky is not the limit for someone like you. With love, Clara and the entire Vortex Dynamics team." Theo was deeply moved. He spent the rest of the day assembling the model with Raul's help, explaining each part as if he were the chief engineer of the project. For Raul, seeing his grandson so focused was a relief, even if only temporary. As the days passed, Theo's health began to decline rapidly. He spent more time in bed, too exhausted even to climb the small hill where his telescope was set up. Raul did everything he could to keep him comfortable, reading to him about planets, galaxies, and scientific discoveries. "Grandpa, did you know there are more stars in the universe than grains of sand on Earth?" Theo asked, his voice weak but still full of curiosity. "And you know all of them, don't you?" Raul replied, trying to hide his emotion. "Not yet, but one day, I will." One night, when the sky was particularly clear, Raul decided to bring the telescope to the porch so Theo could stargaze one last time. "Here it is, kiddo. The whole universe, just for you." Though frail, Theo made the effort to look through the telescope. His eyes sparkled as he identified a constellation. "It's the Little Dipper, and the North Star. They'll always be there, no matter what happens." Raul felt a pang in his chest but stayed by Theo's side, holding his hand as he explored the sky one final time. In the early hours of the next morning, Theo passed away peacefully, with a smile on his lips and the rocket fragment Clara had given him clutched in his hand. Raul, by his side, held his grandson's hand until the very end, feeling his world collapse around him. "You're among the stars now, my boy," Raul whispered, tears streaming freely down his face. After Theo was gone, Raul spent days gazing at the sky, feeling an emptiness as vast as the universe itself. Yet, at the same time, there was a strange sense of peace in his heart. He knew he had done everything he could to give Theo an unforgettable experience, and the boy's smile during the launch was a memory that would never leave him. That night, as he stared at the stars, Raul spoke aloud, as if Theo could hear him. "You're up there now, piloting the fastest rocket of them all. And I'm here, looking at you." The sky, with its infinite lights, had never felt so alive. Raul knew that, even in absence, Theo continued to shine, like the brightest star of them all. Grief weighed heavily on Raul, but he found strength in the memories of Theo. Every glance at the sky brought back the boy's enthusiasm, his questions, and his contagious smile. Raul knew he couldn't let Theo's legacy fade away. Inspired by his grandson's passion, he decided to act. Raul picked up Theo's notebook, where the boy had drawn constellations and written his thoughts about space. Flipping through its pages, he felt it was his duty to share Theo's love for the universe with others. With help from Clara and Vortex Dynamics, Raul began organizing small events in his town for children interested in astronomy. He used Theo's telescope to show them the stars and shared the stories his grandson had loved so much. "My grandson Theo taught me that the sky is for all of us. And today, he's up there, watching over us," Raul would tell the kids, his voice heavy with tears but his face lit by a smile. The children were captivated, some even starting to dream of pursuing careers in science. Clara, deeply moved by the impact of Raul's initiative, promised continued support from Vortex Dynamics. One day, Raul received a letter from Vortex Dynamics. Clara wrote to inform him that the team had decided to name one of the modules on an upcoming space mission in Theo's honor. The module would be called Theo's Light, a tribute to the boy who had inspired both the team and the local community. Raul read the letter in silence, his hands trembling as he held it. Finally, he looked up at the sky and whispered, "You did it, kiddo. Now everyone will know who you are." On the day of the rocket launch carrying the Theo's Light module, Raul was invited as an honored guest. Sitting in the same area where Theo had watched his first launch, Raul stared at the towering rocket, his heart heavy with emotion and longing. As the rocket launched, Raul murmured to himself, "This is for you, Theo." The deafening sound and fiery trail left in the sky were more than just a memory, they were a celebration of a boy who had touched infinity with his dream. When Raul returned home, Theo's telescope remained untouched, still pointed at the sky. Every night, Raul continued to use it, though now with a different purpose. It wasn't just a search for Theo but to feel his presence among the stars. "Good night, star pilot," he would say, like a ritual, before going to bed. The sky had never been just the sky for Theo and Raul. It was a portal, a memory, and an eternal home. Though the loss was irreplaceable, Theo's legacy continued to inspire generations, a light that would never fade in the vastness of the universe.